Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalists of Arlington.
We choose.
We choose.
We choose to be
a liberal religious community.
Welcoming
to all.
We encourage each other
on our spiritual journeys.
Support one another
through the changes in our lives.
And challenge the excesses
and injustices of our time.
Called to love.
To love.
To love.
And upheld by joy.
We live our faith.
I invite you to take a posture of prayer. Plant your feet on the floor. Take a breath. Spirit of life and love, be with us. Steady our breath, ground our feet. Help us to be present, even as our world today might feel overwhelming and scary. This is one of those times, a time when violence clips at our heels, brutality appears daily on our phones, in the streets, across our headlines. The terror of these moments can feel surreal. Help us to be present. Help us to choose love. We take a moment to remember the lives of 3 people shot by ICE agents within the last 4 weeks. Keith Porter, Renee Nicole Good, Alex Pretty, help us to be present. Help us to choose love. Spirit of life, so much that swirls around us is out of our control. And yet we are called to do what we can, to find resolve in our breath, to wrestle with hope, to grab it in unexpected places, to choose love, even when it's inconvenient, even when it feels like others aren't. A love that takes care of our neighbors, that rests when we need it and fights when we can. A love that rests and fights, rests and fights. Help us to be present. Help us to choose love. A love that demands justice. A love that is fierce and unafraid. May we choose love again and again. let us sit with the stirrings of our hearts for 2 minutes of shared silence.
Three weeks ago, I talked a little bit about Brené Brown's marble jar. I don't know if any of you remember that, or if any of you went home and thought, oh my gosh, I lost my marbles. But it was an analogy for how trust is built. And the idea is that sometimes with our interactions with others or with institutions, we have a full marble jar, meaning that we have plenty of trust there. And there are other times when the trust jar is a bit depleted. So the question then becomes, do we want to invest more marbles in their jars and top it up? Or are we willing to just let that relationship go? And the choice is up to us, of course. And I love how Brené Brown comes up with very tangible ways in which to look at those marble jars. And she calls it the anatomy of trust. And by doing so, she came up with an acronym, the BRAVING acronym, right? BRAVING, which stands for boundaries, reliability, accountability, VOLT, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Congratulations, you passed the test. You're brilliant. You listened to me last time. I'm so impressed. So today, as I mentioned 3 weeks ago, by the way, each of those could be its own sermon, right? But I'm not going to have is it 7 letters, 7-part sermon on it? So today I did bracket the B part, which is boundaries. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And let me begin by telling you a story about a 40-plus-year-old Asian person. We'll call this person Jamie, who's non-binary. Oh, not your Jamie, Mary, sorry. A different Jamie, a hypothetical Jamie, let me just put it that way, who went back to their parents' place. So they don't live with their parents, they live in another state completely, for the holidays. And you may or may not be surprised that the parents kept Jamie's room just the way it was when Jamie was in their 20s. The exact same bed, the exact same furniture, the exact same setup as if it was preserved like a museum. And of course, the way they treated Jamie when Jamie stayed with them was probably just like when Jamie was in their 20s. And they just barged right in to Jamie's room one evening and started talking about the financial support that Jamie was giving to their parents, about how that needs to be renegotiated because of inflation and all these other factors. And that really caught Jamie by surprise. And needless to say, Jamie was not thrilled about the conversation because in Jamie's mind, they were being more than generous to their parents. Those of you of Asian descent, by the way, will probably get the whole filial piety concept, right? That when parents get older, you're the ones that support them. So it's kind of like reverse social security of some sort, you know? And so words got said and emotions rose, right? And there was conflict that took place. And again, coming from an Asian background, Jamie did not feel like they could necessarily say what they needed to out of respect to their parents. And the parents, of course, even after hearing what the impact was on Jamie, did not apologize because elders could do no wrong, as we all know, right? And so there was, again, an emotional disconnect there as hard as Jamie tried to articulate what Jamie's needs are. So this is a very clear instance of at least 3 levels of boundaries being violated. The first one is an emotional boundary. And boundaries, by the way, are nothing more than clarification of our needs in order to feel safe. And so Jamie no longer felt safe because they felt like their emotions weren't being recognized and they were being violated. And this was when Jamie read a book by Nedra Tawwab, that's with 2 W's, Tawwab, called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. So Nedra is an African-American therapist who lives in New York. And Jamie found that book very helpful because it talks about how to have this level of self-differentiation, for example, right? Of knowing where one ends and another begins. Knowing that Jamie's issues are very different from Jamie's parents' issues. And knowing that after reading that book, knowing that Nedra Tawwab mentions how family relationships are the most difficult to draw boundaries around. Can I get an amen from somebody who agrees with that? Because there is just so much history and baggage with our family members, and the fact that there's sometimes guilt introduced into those family dynamics. Are Asian families the only ones that experience guilt? I heard somewhere that Jewish families have a tremendous amount of guilt as well, or Catholic families. We could go down the list and we could compare one guilt from another, but nonetheless, family guilt and those dynamics exist, which makes it super hard to draw boundaries. And guess what? Once you let your guard down, you have to start over again and do the reset button, because people are just going to keep pushing and pushing until they get what they want, which is why it is so dang important to not control how other people feel, but to control how you feel and what your reaction is, and making sure that you're the one that sticks to your boundaries. So that's the first avenue that Nedra Tawwab talks about, is having the sense of self-differentiation and knowing that, yeah, Jamie's parents are probably never gonna apologize to them, and that is perfectly okay. What Jamie is responsible for is their own actions, their own feelings. And so some of you may have heard of a movie that came out a few years ago that talks a lot about emotions. So this is the hint to what the movie is about, right? Let me give you another hint. It's a Christmas classic. It kind of took the place of It's a Wonderful Life. It was a movie that came out in the early 2000s called Love, Actually. And this was one of the scenes where this creepy, stalky guy went to his best friend's wife's place in order to try to show his feelings for her. Right? Now, I must also say, and I don't mean to yuck on anyone's yum, but over the years, this movie has become highly problematic. Because there are other characters, not just the creepy, stalky guy in this movie, like a prime minister, for example, who falls in love with his administrator, or back then they probably called them secretaries, right? Which, by the way, is so cliche. Like, pick another worker or employee to fall in love with other than your own secretary or administrator, right? And I don't care if you're Hugh Grant, but that's still freaking inappropriate because there are power dynamics involved, people. Like, his power as prime minister is greater than the administrator's power, right? So we should probably rename, and I get there's this argument that the heart does what it wants, right? Anybody heard that argument before? And it goes where it wants to go. But again, when you're in a power differential dynamic, have some good boundaries is my recommendation. And therefore, I think we should rename that movie to Inappropriate, actually. every single one of those relationships almost, you know? But I must say, I still have a soft spot for that one scene with Emma Thompson listening to that sad, sad music of, what's it called again? Joni Mitchell's River? Is that the name of it? Okay. Yeah, I could sing it for you, but I'd be bawling in front of you. And again, that would be inappropriate. So how do we have good boundaries around our emotions? That's the first concept I wanted to talk about. The second one is around time. So after that incident with Jamie and their parents, they decided to no longer stay more than 3 days during the holidays. And along with time also comes place. So they now stay at a hotel so that they don't have to stay and sleep in the same room as when they did when they were in their 20s. So that's a good boundary around time, because guess what? We all just have the same amount of time, believe it or not, which is 24 hours, right? Shocker. And guess what? Their time is not a renewable resource. So we can't get our time back. What can we put our boundaries around time on? One is to not make everything a sense of urgency, to somehow prioritize who we want to spend time with and what we want to spend our time doing, right? So that is within our control. And guess what else is within our control? To do less, to delegate responsibilities to others, or to ask for help. So those are the ways in which we could somehow play around with this whole idea of time. And you know what else I want to talk about today? That is this American culture of overworking. Did you know that we are the only developed economy in the world that does not have a federally mandated time off? Zero. Kind of the only two other countries are Palau and Micronesia, or somewhere in the South Pacific, right? I know you may say, well, it's common practice, isn't it, for an employer to give at least 10 days holidays a year? And out of that, how many employees actually fully take those 10 days? So what was revelatory for me was when Nedra Tawwab talks about how we all need to take every single one of our vacation days. And I must say, I kind of learned this the hard way. Because the other two countries that they mentioned that are poor at taking vacations and fall into the trap of overwork are China and the Philippines. I grew up in the Philippines. I'm of Chinese descent. And I have parents who are workaholics. Thank you very much. So I am the perfect candidate to fall prey to overworking. And guess what? With my first settled ministry, that's exactly what I did. Worked 60 full hours and almost burned myself out. And guess what? It didn't seem like I was being more productive than ever, but rather the opposite. I just got sick, and finally I decided for myself, this ain't worth it. This ain't worth losing my health over. So it is up to me to decide how I want to draw boundaries around my time, and it is up to me to actually take my days off and the vacation days that I was entitled to. And that actually turned out to be the opposite, which is that I became more productive, my spirit was nourished, and so I was just not serving myself, but I was also more effective with the congregation I was serving. Because when I took a training 3 years ago, when I worked for the UUA in the credentialing department, we were the office that was adjudicating all the complaints around clergy misconduct, right? And so I thought that there would be some really helpful tips in terms of didactically what the training that we took with what was then known as the Faith Trust Institute would have taught me. It's now unfortunately a defunct organization. It was founded by Marie Fortune. But rather, the first part of that training was to fill out a worksheet that talks about the ways in which we practice self-care. You know, are you eating right? Are you sleeping well? Are you taking care of your body by working out or doing yoga? Are you engaging with your spiritual practices? All these questions, right? And I was like, where is this leading? And we all probably already know this, but when we do all those things, when we take care of ourselves, when we take mental care, health days, for examples, and breaks, we are actually making sure that we are feeding ourselves and that we are practicing something that would help us draw better boundaries, because if we don't do those things, it leads to us making bad choices. Any of you ever had those days when you are just so burnt out and so crispy that you can't even think straight, right? Sorry, no pun intended. I could never think straight. Some of you got that. So that's the other way to look at this, is how could we have better boundaries around our time? And lastly, I just want to mention really quickly this whole idea, again, I was talking about Jamie's situation with filial piety. How do we draw boundaries around our money and our possessions, right? So if we lend someone money, for example, how do we make sure we are clear about the terms of when we expect to get that money back and how much interest we're charging that person or not, right? And if money's too touchy an issue, then don't lend them money. Or if they have a track record of not paying you back, then that tells you something right there too, right? Or maybe if money, you don't want to talk about money, I get it. Let's talk about snowblowers, right? If you lend someone your snowblower, you expect to get it back at some point, don't you? Okay, if that analogy still doesn't work for you, books. Even if you write your name on it, if you lend someone a book, forget it. You're never going to get it back, right? So how do we draw good boundaries so that we have clarity? And at this point, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, I get it, but at some point, this could go too far. What about people with rigid boundaries, right, that could never be violated? Well, I would say to you that that is a form of unhealthy boundary. That in my mind, a healthy boundary actually lies somewhere in between no boundary and that unhealthy, rigid boundary place, right? And how do you know when someone has no boundaries? Because after that conversation, you end up feeling resentful and frustrated and just, just like, again, frustrated about the whole interaction. That's usually a sign that you're dealing with someone with no boundaries. Or maybe it's yourself that you don't have boundaries around. So again, a rigid boundary is problematic because it's unhealthy. And a healthy boundary, however, is a little bit more flexible and has wiggle room. An unhealthy boundary is like you put up a wall with other people, and a healthy boundary shows how you could exist in relationship with another person. So it's within your control and your power to show another how you want to be in relationship with them. And a unhealthy boundary is one-sided, and a healthy boundary says that not everything is one size fits all. So there is a little bit more adaptability and willingness to make the boundaries a little bit more permeable in a healthy boundary situation. All right, so are we in sync so far? And again, let's backtrack a little bit more and say, well, my fear, if I were to draw boundaries for myself, is that I would actually be in conflict with another person. And I say to you, the opposite is actually true. When you're not clear about things, that actually is what leads to conflict, because conflict is nothing more than mismatched expectations, right? So again, clarity is important, because the more clear we are, the more kind and direct we are with another person, the clearer our boundaries are. So let me read you a list from Nedra Tawwab of boundaries that you might want to consider. I say no to things I don't like. I say no to things that don't contribute to my growth. I say no to things that rob me of valuable time. I spend time around healthy people. I reduce my interactions with people who drain my energy, those dementors, And I protect my energy against people who threaten my sanity. I practice positive self-talk. I allow myself to feel and not judge my feelings. I forgive myself when I make a mistake. I actively cultivate the best version of myself. I turn off my phone when appropriate. I sleep when I'm tired. I mind my own damn business. Oh, wait, no, that was a quote from Tim Walz. I mind my business. I make tough decisions because they're healthy for me. I create space for activities that bring me joy. I say yes to activities that interest me despite my anxiety about trying them. I experience things alone instead of waiting for the right people to join me. Any of those resonate with you? It's one of those lists that you could practice and look in the mirror and say all day, right? And notice how it's actually a progression. It starts out with a bunch of no's. And that's exactly what boundaries are about. It begins with saying no to things. And then remember, I mentioned in December during my sermon on Not Nice, Dr. Aziz Gazipura says that we need to come up with a list of our tasks. And if there's only two ways you could go about this list, it's either a no or a hell yes, right? Nothing else in between. And it becomes so difficult to actually just focus on the hell yeses in our lives, because we have those kind of maybes and somewhat yeses maybe, but Dr. Seitz says, nope, just go with the hell yeses. So moving forward, the question is up to us, really, of how we want to continue to build trust within ourselves, within our relationship with others, and with our institutions. Because God knows this world needs well-bounded people. As we look at our political institutions, for example, we see so many violations of boundaries right now. How can we model it? How could we be that countercultural force? How could we put our faith in trusting one another? Go ye therefore, rise up. Your faith has made you well. Amen.